in 10. So I say, the weather is bad today because it's taking too long to upload the videos because of freaking rain. This weather sucks here. What is the weather tomorrow?
The forecast is calling for rain tomorrow.
See, rain again. Can you get a break from rain? What is the rain? What is the weather Monday?
Expect partly cloudy skies on Monday.
It just keeps raining. So basically, I'm in chapter Noah, Deuteronomy chapter 10. It says a new of the covenant. At that time, the Lord said to me, just out to stone tablets like the first ones. Also make a wooden ark, a sacred chest to store them in. Come up to me on the mountain, and I will write on the tablets the same words that were on the ones you smashed. Then place the tablets in the ark. So I made an ark of acacia wood and cut stone tablets like the first two. Then I went up the mountain. Oh, it finally uploaded. I like that iPhone Pro Max because it's more faster than my iPhone 12. So I made an arc of acacia wood and cut two stone tablets like the first two, and then I went up the mountain with the tablets in my hand. Once again, the Lord wrote the 10 Commandments on the tablets and gave them to me, and they were the same words the Lord had spoken to you from the heart of the fire on the day you were assembled at the foot of the mountain. Then I turned and came down the mountain and placed the tablets in the ark of the covenant which I had made, just as the Lord commanded me. And the tablets are still in the ark.
Um, Whatever his little reasons are, he doesn't want to say.
The people of Israel set out from the wells.
You're absolutely right. After investing 8 months getting to know someone online, to then be told it's not worth meeting them in person would be extremely disappointing and hurtful. Your few thoughts on why it would be pragmatic. 8 months is a significant amount of time to build a rapport, share personal details, and build some type of like emotions for knowing the person for someone without ever having met them. Leading someone on for that long, only to reject, taking it to the next level is distinguished and disrespectful of their time and emotions. It applies their interest in communication over many months was insincere if they had no real intention of meeting all along. Wasting someone's effort, hopes, and vulnerability, telling them things that's not true over such an attentive period without the purpose is unfair and damaging. Building a bond solely online removes crucial in-person evaluations to determine capability or lack thereof before emotions are deeply invested. It's not worth meeting, despite 8 months applies deeper issues with trust, security, or lack of genuine interest.
Then I turned and came down the mountain and placed the tablets in the ark of the covenant which I had made, just as the Lord commanded me. And the tablets are still in the ark. The people of Israel set out from the wells of the people at Jacqueline and traveled to Morsra, where Aaron died and was buried. His son Uzziah Mizer ministered as a high priest in his place. Then they journeyed in Lagudiah, and from there to Jonarah, a land from many brooks and streams. At that time the Lord set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of the Lord's covenant and to stand before the Lord as his ministers and to pronounce blessings in his name. These are their duties to this day. That is why the Levites have no share in property or possession of land among the other Israelite tribes. The Lord himself is their special possession, as the Lord your God told them. As for me, I stayed on the mountain in the Lord's presence for 40 days and nights, as I had done the first time. And once again the Lord listened to my pleas and agreed not to destroy you. That the Lord said to me, "Get up and resume the journey and lead the people to the land I swore to give to their ancestors, so they may take possession of it." Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12, a call to love and obedience. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? He requires only that you fear the Lord your God and live in a way that pleases him, and love him and serve him with all your heart and soul. And you must always obey the Lord's commands and decrees that I am giving you today for your own good. Look, the highest heavens, the earth, and everything in it belongs to the Lord your God. Everything on this earth, your possessions, everything. And people live for themselves. They don't care about nothing about this Bible, what it has to say, or they like to say it's man-made written. Their descendants. Yet the Lord chose your ancestors as objects of his love, and he chose you, their descendants, above all other nations, as is evident today. Therefore, change your hearts and stop being stubborn. For the Lord your God is the God of gods and Lord of lords. He is the great God, the mighty and awesome God, who shows no partiality and cannot be bred. He ensures that orphans and widows receive justice. He shows love to the foreigners living among you and gives them food and clothing. So you too must show love to foreigners, for you yourself were once foreigners in the land of Egypt. You must fear the Lord your God and worship him only, cling to him. Your oaths must be in his name alone. He alone is your God, the only one who is worthy of your praise, the one who has done these mighty miracles that you have seen with your own eyes when your ancestors went down into Egypt. There were only 70 of them, but now the Lord your God has made you numbers as the stars in the sky. So that was Numbers chapter 10. Deuteronomy chapter 10. So, Deuteronomy chapter 10 is a chapter in the book of Deuteronomy that emphasizes the importance of obedience to God, love, and reverence for God, as well as God's justice and care for the vulnerable. In Deuteronomy 10, Moses continues his address to the Israelites, recounting the events following their disobedience. With the golden calf, he explains how, in response to his intercession, God instructed him to make new tablets and reaffirm his covenant with the Israelites. Moses also reminds the people of their responsibility to love and serve God wholeheartedly and to show justice and compassion towards the fatherless, widows, and foreigners. Deuteronomy chapter 10 teaches us obedience and love for God. The chapter phrases the importance of obedience and love for God. Moses reminds the Israelites that God expects them to fear Him, walk in His ways, and serve Him with all their heart and soul. Obedience and love are interconnected, and our actions show flow from a genuine love for God. God's justice and care for the vulnerable. Moses highlights God's justice and care for the vulnerable members of society, specifically the fatherless, widows, and foreigners. He urges the Israelites to reflect God's character by showing compassion and providing for those in need. This teaches us the importance of attending God's love and care to the marginalized and vulnerable in our own communities. Reverence and worship, Moses phrases the need for the Israelites to circumcise their hearts and no longer be stubborn, but rather to fear and love God. This involves a genuine reverence and worship for God, acknowledging His sovereignty and submitting to His authority. It calls us to examine our own hearts and attitudes, ensuring that our worship is sincere and wholehearted. The application may differ from our lives today. We can still draw a practical application from Deuteronomy chapter 10. By obedience and love, seek to obey God's commands and walk in His ways out of a genuine love for Him. Let your love for God be the foundation for your actions, decisions, and relationships. Prioritize spending time with Him, studying the Word, the Bible, and seeking His guidance in all aspects of your life. Justice and compassion. Reflect God's justice and compassion by caring for the vulnerable and marginalized in your community. Extend love and support to those in need, whether they are fatherless, widows, immigrants, or anyone who requires assistance. Look for opportunities to serve and advocate for justice, standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves, and reverence and worship. Approach your relationship with God in reverence and awe. Cultivate a heart that is open to His leading, willing to submit to His authority, and eager to worship Him sincerely. Examine your motives and attitudes, ensuring that your worship is not merely external, but flows from a genuine reverence for God. In summary, Deuteronomy chapter 10 teaches us about the importance of obedience and love for God, God's justice and care for the vulnerable, and the need for reverence and worship. May we strive to obey and love God, attend justice and compassion to the vulnerable, and approach our relationship with God with reverence and sincerity. So, Deuteronomy chapter 11, it says, "You must love the Lord your God and always obey His requirements, decrees, regulations, and commands. Keep in mind that I am not talking now to your children who have never experienced the discipline of the Lord your God or seen His greatness and His strong hand and powerful arm. They didn't see the miraculous signs and wonders He performed in Egypt against Pharaoh and all his land. They didn't see what the Lord did to the armies of Egypt and to their horses and chariots, how He drowned them in the Red Sea as they were chasing you. He destroyed them, and they have not recovered to this day. Your children didn't see how the Lord cared for you in the wilderness until you arrived here, and they didn't see what He did to Dathan and Abiram, the son of Eliab, a descendant of Reuben, when the earth opened its mouth and the Israelite camp and swallowed them, along with their households and tents and every living thing that belonged to them. But you have seen the Lord. perform all these mighty deeds with your own eyes. The blessings of obedience. Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 8. So there's blessings of obedience, of obeying God. Therefore, be careful to obey every command I'm giving you today, so you may have strength to go in and take over the land you are about to enter. If you obey, you will enjoy a long life in the land the Lord swore to give to your ancestors and to you, their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. For the land you are about to enter and take over is not like the land of Egypt from which you came from, where you planted your seed and made irrigation ditches with your foot as in a vegetable garden. Rather, the land you will soon take over is a land of hills and valleys with plenty of rain, a land that the Lord your God cares for, and he watches over it through every season of the year. If you carefully obey my commands I'm giving you today, and if you love the Lord your God and serve him with all your heart and soul, then he will send the rains in the proper seasons in early and late rains, so you can bring in your harvest of grain, new wine, and olive oil. He will give you lush pasture land for your livestock, and yourselves will have all you want to eat. But be careful, don't let your heart be deceived so that you turn away from the Lord and serve and worship other gods. If you do, the Lord's anger will burn against you. He will shut up the sky and hold back the rain, and the ground will fail to produce its harvest. Then you will quickly die in that good land the Lord is giving you. So commit yourself wholeheartedly to these words of mine. Tie them around your hands and wear them around your forehead as reminders. Teach them to your children and talk about them when you are home and when you are on the road, when you are going to bed and when you are going getting up. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So as long as the sky remains above the earth, you and your children may flourish in the land the Lord swore to give your ancestors. Be careful to obey all these commands I am giving you. Show love to the Lord your God by walking in his ways and holding tightly to him. Then the Lord will drive out all the nations ahead of you, for they are much greater and stronger than you, and you will take over their land. Wherever you set foot, and land will be yours. Your your frontiers were stretched from the wilderness in the south to Lebanon in the north, and from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you, for the Lord your God will cause the people to fear and dread you. Hold on. Or fear and dread you, as he promised wherever you go. In the whole line. Look, today I'm giving you the choice between a blessing and a curse. You will be blessed if you obey the commands of the Lord your God that I'm giving you today. But you will be cursed if you reject the commands of the Lord your God and turn away from him and worship gods you have not known before. And when the Lord your God brings you into the land and helps you take possession of it, you must pronounce the blessings at Mount Gerizim and the curse at Mount Elah. These two mountains are west of the Jordan River in the land of the Canaanites who live in the Jordan Valley near the town of Gilead, not far from the oaks of Moriah. For you are about to cross the Jordan River to take over the land the Lord your God is giving you. When you take the land and are living in it, you must be careful to obey all the decrees and regulations I am giving you today. So that was Deuteronomy chapter 11. So in this chapter in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 11, obedience to God's commands, the blessings that come from following his ways, and the consequences of turning away from him. In Deuteronomy chapter 11, Moses continues his addresses to the Israelites, urging them to love and obey God's commands as they prepare to enter the promised land. He reminds them of the wonders that they witnessed in Egypt and during their wilderness journey, and phrasing that these experiences were a result of God's faithfulness and should serve as a motivation to obey his commands in the land they are about to possess. Deuteronomy 11 teaches us several significant lessons. Obedience and God's blessings. The chapter phrases the correlation between obedience to God's commands and the blessings that result from it. Moses reminds the Israelites of the fruitful land they are about to inherit, a land flowing with milk and honey, and assures them that these blessings are contingent upon their obedience to God's laws. This highlights the importance of aligning our lives with God's commands in order to experience his blessings and favor. Remembering God's faithfulness, Moses urges the Israelites to remember and pass down to future generations the acts of God's faithfulness they would have witnessed. This includes his deliverance from Egypt, his provision in the wilderness, and his guidance through their journey. Remembering God's faithfulness serves a source of encouragement and motivates them to remain faithful to him. The consequences of disobedience. Moses also warns the Israelites about the consequences of turning away from God and disobeying his commands. He reminds them of the judgment that befall those who rebelled against God in the past and urges them to choose obedience in life rather than disobedience in death. This teaches us the importance of making wise choices and understanding the potential consequences of our actions. While the specific context of Israelites entering the promised land may differ from our lives today, we can still draw a practical application from Deuteronomy chapter 11. Number one is obedience and blessings. Make a conscious effort to align your life with God's commands, seeking to obey him in all areas. Recognize that obedience is not merely a duty, but a pathway to experiencing God's blessings and favor. Trust that as you follow his ways, he will guide, and provide for you. Remember God's faithfulness. Reflect on God's faithfulness in your own life and share these stories with others. Remembering how has been faithful in the past can strengthen your faith and encourage others in their own journey. Look for opportunities to testify to God's goodness and faithfulness. Consider the consequences of your choices and actions and understand that disobedience to God's commands can lead to negative consequences and separation from his blessings. Seek God's wisdom and guidance in decision making and choose the path of obedience in life. Deuteronomy chapter 11 teaches us about the importance of obedience and the blessings that come from following God's commands, the need to remember God's faithfulness, and the consequence of turning away from him. May we strive to obey God's commands, remember his faithfulness, and make wise choices that align with his will, trusting in his blessings and guidance in our life. So we're in Deuteronomy chapter 12. Wait, this thing is not doing nothing. I don't know why it's not reading. Why isn't it?
Chapter 12. The Lord's chosen place for worship. These are the decrees and regulations you must be careful to obey when you live in the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. You must obey them as long as you live. When you drive out the nations that live there, you must destroy all the places where they worship their gods, high on the mountains, up on the hills, and under every green tree. Break down their altars and smash their sacred pillars. Burn their Asherah poles and cut down their carved idols. Completely erase the names of their gods. Do not worship the Lord your God in the way these pagan peoples worship their gods. Rather, you must seek the Lord your God at the place of worship he himself will choose from among all the tribes, the place where his name will be honored. There you will bring your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, your sacred offerings, your offerings to fulfill a vow, your voluntary offerings, and your offerings of the firstborn animals of your herds and flocks. There you and your families will feast in the presence of the Lord your God, and you will rejoice in all you have accomplished because the Lord your God has blessed you. Your pattern of worship will change. Today, all of you are doing as you please because you have not yet arrived at the place of rest, the land the Lord your God is giving you as your special possession. But you will soon cross the Jordan River and live in the land the Lord your God is giving you. When he gives you rest from all your enemies and you're living safely in the land, you must bring everything I command you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, your sacred offerings, and your offerings to fulfill a vow, to the designated place of worship, the place the Lord your God chooses for his name to be honored. You must celebrate there in the presence of the Lord your God with your sons and daughters and all your servants. And remember to include the Levites who live in your towns, for they will receive no allotment of land among you. Be careful not to sacrifice your burnt offerings just anywhere you like. You may do so only at the place the Lord will choose within one of your tribal territories. There you must offer your burnt offerings and do everything I command you. But you may butcher your animals and eat their meat in any town whenever you want. You may freely eat the animals with which the Lord your God blesses you. All of you, whether ceremonially clean or unclean, may eat that meat, just as you now eat gazelle and deer. But you must not eat the blood. You must pour it out on the ground like water. But you may not eat your offerings in your hometown. Neither the tithe of your grain and new wine and olive oil, nor the firstborn of your flocks and herds, nor any offering to fulfill a vow, nor your voluntary offerings, nor your sacred offerings. You must eat these in the presence of the Lord your God at the place he will choose. Eat them there with your children, your servants, and the Levites who live in your towns, celebrating in the presence of the Lord your God in all you do. And be very careful never to neglect the Levites as long as you live in your land. When the Lord your God expands your territory as he has promised, and you have the urge to eat meat, you may freely eat meat whenever you want. It might happen that the designated place of worship, the place the Lord your God chooses for his name to be honored, is a long way from your home. If so, you may butcher any of the cattle, sheep, or goats the Lord has given you, and you may freely eat the meat in your hometown, as I have commanded you. Anyone, whether ceremonially clean or unclean, may eat that meat, just as you do now with gazelle and deer. But never eat the blood, for the blood is the life, and you must not eat the lifeblood with the meat. Instead, pour out the blood on the ground like water. Do not eat the blood, so that all may go well with you and your children after you, because you will be doing what pleases the Lord. Take your sacred gifts and your offerings given to fulfill a vow to the place the Lord chooses. You must offer the meat and blood of your burnt offerings on the altar of the Lord your God. The blood of your other sacrifices must be poured out on the altar of the Lord your God, but you may eat the meat. Be careful to obey all my commands, so that all will go well with you and your children after you, because you will be doing what is good and pleasing to the Lord your God. When the Lord your God goes ahead of you and destroys the nations, you drive them out and live in their land, do not fall into the trap of following their customs and worshiping their gods. Do not inquire about their gods, saying, how do these nations worship their gods? I want to follow their example. You must not worship the Lord your God the way the other nations worship their gods, for they perform for their gods every detestable act that the Lord hates. They even burn their sons and daughters as sacrifices to their gods. So be careful to obey all the commands I give you. You must not add anything to them or subtract anything from them.
So that was Deuteronomy chapter 12. Deuteronomy chapter 12 is a chapter or book of Deuteronomy that emphasizes the proper worship of God and the importance of centralized worship. In Deuteronomy chapter 12, Moses continues his addresses the Israelites, instructing them to on how to worship and serve God. Once they enter the promised land, he phrases the need to destroy all the places where the nations they were disposes have worshipped their gods and to establish a central place of worship chosen by God. Moses also provides guidance on the proper handling of sacrifices and offerings. The Deuteronomy 12 teaches us that exclusive worship of God. The chapter phrases the exclusive worship of God and the destruction of pagan worship practices. Moses instructs the Israelites to completely remove the worship practices of the nations in the promised land and to worship God alone. This highlights the importance of giving our full devotion and alliance to God, avoiding any form of idolatry or syncretism. Centralized worship. Moses phrases the establishment of a central place of worship chosen by God. He instructs the Israelites to bring their sacrifices and offerings to this chosen location rather than offering them in any place they desire. This centralizes the serves to maintain the purity of worship and the unity among the people, ensuring that they are not led astray by false gods or practices. In the proper handling of sacrifices, Moses provides a guidance on the proper handling of sacrifices and offerings. He instructs the Israelites to offer their burnt offerings and sacrifices in the designated place and to not eat the blood of the animals. This teaches us the importance of reverence and obedience in our worship, ensuring that we approach God with sincerity and following His instructions. While this context of centralized worship and sacrifices may differ from our lives today as Christians, we can still draw practical applications from Deuteronomy chapter 12. Number one, exclusive worship. Examine your own life to ensure that you are giving your full devotion and worship to God alone, and identify any areas where worldly desires or false gods may be competing for your alliance and make a conscious effort to remove them. Cultivate a heart that seeks to honor and worship God alone and recognizing Him as the one true God. Unity in community, recognizing the importance of unity in community and worship. Engage in regular fellowship with other believers and participate in a local church community. Worshiping together and supporting one another spiritually strengthens our faith and helps us grow in our relationship with God. Reverence and obedience. Approach your worship with reverence and obedience, following God's instructions. Seek to understand and apply biblical principles in your worship practices, and strive to offer your whole life as a living sacrifice to God, surrendering your desires and aligning your actions with His will. Deuteronomy chapter 12 teaches us about the exclusive worship of God, the importance of centralized worship, and the need of reverence and obedience in our worship practices. May we strive to worship God alone and seek unity in our communities and approach our worship with reverence and obedience, honoring Him in all aspects of our lives. So we're in chapter 13.
Chapter 13. A warning against idolatry. Suppose there are prophets among you, or those who dream dreams about the future, and they promise you signs or miracles, and the predicted signs or miracles occur. If they then say, "Come, let us worship other gods, gods you have not known before," do not listen to them. The Lord your God is testing you to see if you truly love Him with all your heart and soul. Serve only the Lord your God and fear Him alone. Obey His commands, listen to His voice, and cling to Him. The false prophets or visionaries who try to lead you astray must be put to death, for they encourage rebellion against the Lord your God, who redeemed you from slavery and brought you out of the land of Egypt. Since they try to lead you astray from the way the Lord your God commanded you to live, you must put them to death. In this way, you will purge the evil from among you. Suppose someone secretly entices you, even your brother, your son or daughter, your beloved wife, or your closest friend, and says, "Let us go worship other gods, gods that neither you nor your ancestors have known." They might suggest that you worship the gods of peoples who live nearby, or who come from the ends of the earth. But do not give in or listen. Have no pity, and do not spare or protect them. You must put them to death. Strike the first blow yourself, and then all the people must join in. Stone the guilty ones to death, because they have tried to draw you away from the Lord your God, who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of slavery. Then all Israel will hear about it and be afraid, and no one will act so wickedly again. When you begin living in the towns the Lord your God is giving you, you may hear that scoundrels among you are leading their fellow citizens astray by saying, "Let us go worship other gods, gods you have not known before." In such cases, you must examine the facts carefully. If you find that the report is true and such a detestable act has been committed among you, you must attack that town and completely destroy all its inhabitants as well as all the livestock. Then you must pile all the plunder in the middle of the open square and burn it. Burn the entire town as a burnt offering to the Lord your God. That town must remain a ruin forever. It may never be rebuilt. Keep none of the plunder that has been set apart for destruction. Then the Lord will turn from his fierce anger and be merciful to you. He will have compassion on you and make you a large nation, just as he swore to your ancestors. The Lord your God will be merciful only if you listen to his voice and keep all his commands that I am giving you today, doing what pleases him.
So Deuteronomy chapter 13. Deuteronomy 13. Moses warns against false prophets and adultery, and then first in the importance of remaining faithful to God. In Deuteronomy 13, Moses addresses the Israelites, cautioning them about the presence of false prophets or dreamers who may arise among them. He warns the people not to follow these individuals, even if they perform signs or wonders, if they lead them away from the worship of the one true God. Moses retreats the command to worship God alone and to adhere to his commandments. Deuteronomy chapter 13 teaches us several significant lessons. The discernment of false prophets. The chapter phrases the need for discernment when it comes to identifying false prophets or individuals who claim to have a message from God. Moses warns that the Israelites not to be swayed by signs or wonders performed by such individuals if they contradict the worship and commandments of God. This highlights the importance of testing every message against the truth of God's word. Faithfulness to God. Moses underscores the command to remain faithful to God and to worship him alone. He instructs the Israelites to love and serve God with all their heart and soul, and not to be enticed by other gods' false worship practices. This teaches us the importance of maintaining our devotion to God and resisting the allure of idolatry or false religious beliefs. Consequences of adultery. Moses warns about the severe consequences of turning away from God and engaging in adultery. He phrases that such actions lead to the destruction of not only the individuals involved but also their communities. This serves as a reminder of the seriousness of adultery and the terminal effects on both individuals and society. While the context of false prophets and adultery may differ in our modern lives, and as Christians, we can still draw practical applications from it. Discernment. Develop a discerning spirit, immersing yourself in God's word. Test every teaching, message, or spiritual spirit against the truth of the scripture of the Bible. Seek the guidance of the Holy Spirit to discern between true and false teachings, ensuring that you do not stray from the path of truth and genuine worship. Faithfulness in worship. Remain faithful to God and worship him alone. Guard your heart against the allure of worldly idols or false religious practices. Cultivate a deep love and devotion for God, seeking to honor and serve him with all aspects of your life. Awareness of consequences. Understand that the consequences of turning away from God. Recognize that adultery, whether in the form of material possessions, False beliefs or misplaced priorities can lead to spiritual destruction and harm, not only to yourself, but also to those around you. Seek to live a life that is pleasing to God, rooted in His truth and guided by His commandments. Deuteronomy 13 warns against false prophets and adultery, raising the need for discernment, faithfulness to God, and awareness of the consequences of turning away from Him. May we develop discernment, remain faithful to God, and guard our hearts against adultery, seeking to honor Him in all aspects of our life. So we're in 14 now. Deuteronomy 14.
Chapter 14. Ceremonially clean and unclean animals. Since you are the people of the Lord your God, never cut yourselves or shave the hair above your foreheads in mourning for the dead. You have been set apart as holy to the Lord your God, and He has chosen you from all the nations of the earth to be His own special treasure. You must not eat any detestable animals that are ceremonially unclean. These are the animals you may eat: the ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the gazelle, the roe deer, the wild goat, the addax, the antelope, and the mountain sheep. You may eat any animal that has completely split hooves and chews the cud. But if the animal doesn't have both, it may not be eaten. So you may not eat the camel, the hare, or the hyrax. They chew the cud, but do not have split hooves, so they are ceremonially unclean for you. And you may not eat the pig. It has split hooves, but does not chew the cud, so it is ceremonially unclean for you. You may not eat the meat of these animals or even touch their carcasses. Of all the marine animals, you may eat whatever has both fins and scales. You may not, however, eat marine animals that do not have both fins and scales. They are ceremonially unclean for you. You may eat any bird that is ceremonially clean. These are the birds you may not eat: the griffin vulture, the bearded vulture, the black vulture, the kite, the falcon, buzzards of all kinds, ravens of all kinds, the eagle owl, the short-eared owl, the seagull, hawks of all kinds, the little owl, the great owl, the barn owl, the desert owl, the Egyptian vulture, the cormorant, the stork, herons of all kinds, the hoopoe, and the bat. All winged insects that walk along the ground are ceremonially unclean for you and may not be eaten. But you may eat any winged bird or insect that is ceremonially clean. You must not eat anything that has died a natural death. You may give it to a foreigner living in your town, or you may sell it to a stranger, but do not eat it yourselves, for you are set apart as holy to the Lord your God. You must not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. The giving of tithes. You must set aside a tithe of your crops, 1/10 of all the crops you harvest each year. Bring this tithe to the designated place of worship, the place the Lord your God chooses for His name to be honored, and eat it there in His presence. This applies to your tithes of grain, new wine, olive oil, and the firstborn males of your flocks and herds. Doing this will teach you always to fear the Lord your God. Now, when the Lord your God blesses you with a good harvest, the place of worship He chooses for His name to be honored might be too far for you to bring the tithe. If so, you may sell the tithe portion of your crops and herds, put the money in a pouch, and go to the place the Lord your God has chosen. When you arrive, you may use the money to buy any kind of food you want: cattle, sheep, goats, wine, or other alcoholic drink. Then feast there in the presence of the Lord your God and celebrate with your household. And do not neglect the Levites in your town, for they will receive no allotment of land among you. At the end of every third year, bring the entire tithe of that year's harvest and store it in the nearest town. Give it to the Levites, who will receive no allotment of land among you, as well as to the foreigners living among you, the orphans, and the widows in your towns, so they can eat and be satisfied. Then the Lord your God will bless you in all your work.
So that was Deuteronomy chapter 14. Go up. Deuteronomy 14. So Deuteronomy in chapter 14 is provides instructions regarding dietary laws, tithing, and caring for the poor. In Deuteronomy 14, Moses and continues his addresses to the Israelites, giving them guidance on various aspects of their lives as they prepare to enter the promised land. He starts by reminding them of their identity as God chosen people and instructs them on the dietary laws they should observe. Moses then proceeds to talk about the proper use of tithes and offerings and raising the importance of setting apart a portion of their produce for God. Lastly, he highlights the importance of caring for the poor and the needy among them. Deuteronomy 14 teaches us several significant lessons: holiness and distinctness. The chapter phrases the call for God's people to be holy and distinct from the surrounding nations. Moses outlines specific dietary laws that set the Israelites apart, such as not consuming certain animals, and encourage them to maintain purity in their food choices. This highlights the concept of holiness, the importance of living in a way that reflects God's character. Faithful in giving and stewardship, Moses instructs the Israelites to bring a tithe, a tenth of their produce, to the designated place of worship. This act of tithing is a way for the people to recognize God's provision and to honor Him. With their resources, it teaches the principles of faithful giving and stewardship, acknowledging that all we have come from God and should be used in accordance with His will. Compassion and care for the needy. Moses phrases the importance of caring for the poor and the needy within the community. He instructs the Israelites to leave a portion of their harvest, known as a gleaning, for those who are less fortunate. This demonstrates the value of compassion, generosity, and social responsibility, reminding us to attend a helping hand to those in need. Deuteronomy, the application we can draw from practical applications from Deuteronomy 14: pursuit of holiness, strive to live a life marked by holiness. Distinctiveness, seek to honor God in your choices, including your lifestyle, the entertainment, and the company you keep. You keep, let your actions and decisions reflect the character of God and demonstrate your commitment to following Him. Practice faithful giving by acknowledging God's provision and recognizing that all you have is entrusted to you by Him. Regularly set aside a portion of your income to support the work of God's kingdom and help those in need. Cultivate a heart of generosity and stewardship, using your resources wisely for God's purposes. Be attentive to the needs of the poor and marginalized around you. Look for opportunities to attend compassionate and practical help to those who are struggling. Support organizations or activists that focus on alleviating poverty and meeting the needs of vulnerable communities. Deuteronomy 14 teaches us about the importance of holiness, faithfulness, giving, and stewardship, and compassion and care for the needy. And may we strive to live lives marked by holiness, practice faithful giving, and stewardship, and attending and compassion to those in need, reflecting the character of God, bringing the glory to His name. And that's the chapter Deuteronomy 15, and I'll read that tomorrow.